The last few years have been a huge struggle for many tamariki and their families, with social distancing and isolation keeping whānau apart due to the COVID-19 pandemic. A new book, The Awhi Warrior, has been released by Te Tihi o Ruahine whānau to help families talk with their tamariki about how to manage when separated from loved ones. Co-author Lisa Cherrington of Ngā Tihine Ngāpuhi is one of New Zealand's most experienced clinical psychologists, and she is with me now. Lisa, ngā mihi nui kia koe, and thank you very much for joining us today. So can you just talk us through what prompted you to write the story?
All right, so two things. I had been, there'd been discussions in our Māori Psychologists Forum when COVID hit about how do we look after tamariki, and how do we talk about the changes that were happening. And the answer, one of the answers that I gave, having worked a lot with tamariki and rangatahi in the past, was I'd read them a story, and then we sort of realised, well, there's no stories out there that deal with this from our Māori lens, and so the idea was then we'd create our own. So started writing, it got feedback from our forum, and then went off to Te Tihi o Ruahine, because the idea was we needed to get this out as soon as possible for our whānau, for our tamariki. But it took a little bit. Like, we just sort of, it was just going to be a little photocopied resource, but they actually went through to Massey Press, and now we've got this beautiful taonga. And it's timeless, actually, because even though it came from an experience of a friend of mine who'd just come back when the borders had closed, and she'd posted this picture on Facebook of she was in isolation, when it all first happened, the borders were closed, and her mokos were standing at the fence, and they couldn't awhi her, like she had to say kao. And so that really triggered this whole story about this nanny and her moko, and the nanny trying to say there's other ways that we can receive that nourishment and that sustenance without physical awhi.
Sure,
Yeah.
and there are so many instances like that amongst many whānau. What are the messages at the heart of this book?
Okay. I think at the heart of it, it's about connection, connection Ao Warrior, being able to receive that sustenance, receive and give from the environment. So Taina, the young boy, goes through a whole lot of different experiences with the atua. The nanny's talking to him through it of ways to receive sustenance through papatuanuku, through ranginui, through uru, the stars and the moon, tāwhiri mātia. So it's about connection, connection to the te taiao, but also maintaining that connection with each other.
Sounds beautiful. What were some of the biggest challenges for tamariki over the past couple of years around COVID restrictions?
Yeah. I guess my response to that we need to ask our tamariki that, like, what has been, like, we can only suppose as adults in our own experiences of being in bubbles.
Sure.
My own whānau, I think, is like how they coped with not being able to physically be around their mates and all that kind of thing. But I think the research that hopefully will be coming out will actually clarify it. So I wouldn't want to just make that, just in terms of my own experiences for Māori tamariki, yeah.
Well, there've been much kōrero about the decline in mental health well-being of our tamariki, especially over the last couple of years. How has this impacted your own mahi?
Okay. I think for me, it's resulted in returning back to Māori-led solutions. So I'm a clinical psychologist, and we work in Western ways and a lot of it, but coming back to, for example, liaising, working with Te Tihi o Ruahine, going to whānau order solutions. I'm now working in a kaupapa Māori initiative with Mahia Atu at Te Kurahana, and it's a Māori-led solution. So the impact for me as a Māori clinical psychologist is that what we've been doing for the last 50 years still ain't working. And we're still siloing it, eh? Like, we keep talking about mental health where it needs to be waiora, hauora, and those were some of the findings from the inquiry into mental health, is that Māori Voice was saying we need to focus on holistic wellbeing, and that's not something new. Like we have our tā Meihana jury who's been advocating that for many, many, many years. So to me, it's coming back to kaupapa Māori. There was Kiri Tamihiri Waititi had this analogy of for too long we've been using chocolate sprinkles on white cakes, and now it's time for actually we just need to have our own brown cakes and enough of the sort of sprinkles, if that makes any sense. And so I think the Awhi Warrior is just coming back to, for a tamariki level and whānau level, is just reconnecting back to what we already know that nourishes us spiritually, physically, Ao Warrior.
Sounds like a wonderful taonga, and obviously quite particularly helpful, I guess, for those who are separated from loved ones during the festive season coming up as well. Lisa Charrington, clinical psychologist and co-author of the book of The Awhi Warrior. Thank you so much for your time today. Ngā mihi nui ki a koe.
Kia ora, ngā mihi.